An HDMI capture card can be one of the most useful tools to have as part of your setup, but there's so many different options that it can be kind of confusing to decide which one to choose. Two of the most popular ones being the Blackmagic ATEM Mini and the Elgato Cam Link. So today, I'll attempt to see if I can link their features together in a way that helps you decide which one's the best for you. At their core, both of these options are HDMI capture cards, and what that means is they're going to take an HDMI source and let you capture it and put it into your computer, so that way you could use it for recording or streaming. You can put it into a program like Ecamm Live or OBS or any number of other things. Both of these are also full-size HDMI, so that means whether it's a camera, a console, a computer, you can have a full-size HDMI input. If the source that you're using does not have a full-size HDMI output, like some cameras have micro HDMI or mini HDMI, you can always use an adapter or a specialty cable to convert from that HDMI source to a full-size HDMI. The biggest difference in terms of image quality is that all of the ATEMs, no matter which model you choose, are limited to 1080p, whereas the Cam Link 4K, believe it or not, is 4K or up to 4K. You can use a 1080 or even less signal with it, but it can go all the way up to 4K. And the other big difference is that you plug your HDMI input to the Cam Link and then you connect it to the USB port on your computer. It's a USB type A connector, but if your computer has a USB-C port, you can just use it with an adapter or a hub and it works great. The ATEM Mini, on the other hand, does require an external power source, and then its biggest benefit or advantage over the Cam Link is that not only does it take 4 inputs, but then it's a physical switcher to let you switch between them. I've done reviews on both of these, and in my review of the ATEM Mini, I talked about what a big deal it is to have a 4-source switcher at this price. And if you don't know the whole history on that, definitely check out that video because it maybe gives you some perspective on why these are absolutely amazing. The base model ATEM Mini has a manufacturer's suggested retail price of $295, whereas the Cam Link Pro has a manufacturer's suggested retail price, MSRP, of $130. So there is a bit of a price difference, but both of them are relatively affordable. Now there are a whole bunch of different flavors of ATEMs that you can choose from. There's the ATEM Mini, the absolute base model, which is what this is. This one just lets you switch video sources. You can do some transitions and some picture-in-picture, but nothing too advanced. It doesn't have multi-view output or anything like that. That's the $295 version. The ATEM Mini Pro, which looks just like this, but also gives you multi-view output, is probably the best bang for your buck because they recently reduced the price, so now the MSRP on that is $495. I bought this one personally because I didn't need multi-view output. I just needed to switch between sources for some online classes that I was teaching. But if you want to be able to see everything all at once, all of the inputs running into your ATEM, then getting the Pro or above will be really helpful. There's also the ISO models and then the ATEM Extreme models, which add 8 inputs instead of 4, and I have the ATEM Extreme ISO right here. That's what I usually run things into. The ISO models will not only give you multi-view output and have the ability to stream directly from the device itself, but they also have the ability to record independent tracks to a hard drive and output a DaVinci Resolve file. So after you've done everything and you've done all your switching, you already have a project file that you can open up in DaVinci Resolve and then continue to edit or adjust if you need to. And the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO has an MSRP of $1,499. So all the way from basically $300 to $1,500, that is a wide gap. But at their core, all of them will take multiple HDMI inputs and all of them will let you physically switch between those inputs. The Cam Link basically just lets you put your signal into your computer and then you do what you will with it when it's in there. If you want more than one source, there is a Cam Link Pro, which has 4 inputs, but it is like a capture card that needs to be installed in your computer. It'll work great with a PC. If you're on a Mac, then you would need to build some sort of little external enclosure, which isn't super difficult, but you would have to run power into it, have an external enclosure that would then connect to your computer so that way you can run all 4 inputs, but then you would have 4 4K inputs, which does not actually add up to 16K, it's still 4K. But that's okay. And while the basic Cam Link has an MSRP of $130, the Cam Link Pro has an MSRP of, I wrote it down, $359. So that is more expensive than the basic ATEM Mini, and it's coming up kind of close-ish to the price of the ATEM Mini Pro. So a lot of the decision comes down to whether or not you have more than one source, because if you have one source, then the Cam Link really just makes sense. It's the easiest, simplest way to go. If you have more than one source, then that's where the ATEM Mini starts to make a lot more sense. But then of course you're limited to 1080, which is fine for me. When I'm doing streaming and stuff like that, I don't mind being limited to 1080. But if you want to stream in 4K, or if you want to record directly to your computer, like connect something to Ecamm Live and record directly in there with no record limits or anything, and you want it to be in 4K, then that's where you're gonna need a cam link and not an ATEM. But it's not too difficult to work with multiple sources using a cam link. You can actually connect multiple cam links to your computer if you have enough USB ports for it. So if you want 2 or 3 sources, you could get 2 or 3 cam links and connect them, and then those will show up in Ecamm, OBS, or whatever software you're using as individual sources. You could program hotkeys on your keyboard to switch between the sources, or you could set up something like the Stream Deck to switch between your sources, and then you would still have the physical buttons. Personally, I find the physical buttons to be incredibly helpful. One of my favorite things about the ATEM Mini is that you've just got these big buttons here. The active one is bright red and you can see it out of the corner of your vision. And if you just need to switch stuff, you don't even need to take your eyes off the screen to just sort of feel what you're switching to and switch between angles if you wanted to. So the Stream Deck would let you do a version of that using the cam link, which is pretty neat. And then having each of your sources show up as a separate source in your software is also pretty cool too, because even though you have 4 sources or possibly 8 sources going into an ATEM Mini, it will show up only as one device because this connects via USB-C to your computer, and your computer sees the entire ATEM no matter how much you have connected to it. Even if you have one ATEM connected into another, your computer is going to see the whole thing as one webcam video source. The ATEM also does come with some pretty cool software that lets you adjust some of the features and settings, but also is basically a virtual ATEM, and then you can even expand on some features and create some macro automation. So if there's certain sequences that you want to run all the time, you can just program those in using the software, which is really neat. You can add in an audio delay, because a lot of times when you connect a video capture card and you have an audio source, the two go out of sync during your stream, and that's normal. So sometimes you need to add an audio delay, which will then let them catch up and then match. And you can do that in OBS, you can do that in Ecamm Live, but if you're not using any of those programs, you can also do it directly from the Blackmagic software. The cam link doesn't really come with anything like that. You just use it with whatever application that you're using for your streaming and your recording. Now there are a couple of other key differences too. One, the cam link is silent. It is basically just like a USB flash drive. It doesn't make any sounds, it doesn't have a fan in it. The ATEM Mini does have a fan in it, which tends to be pretty quiet. But every once in a while, especially on my ATEM Mini Extreme, the fan will just kick in and it is super loud. The smaller ATEM has not really been an issue with fan noise. The fan hasn't gotten loud right now on the big ATEM, but if it happens to while I'm recording, you'll definitely hear it. The fans in the ATEM Extreme came on while I was filming B-roll, so maybe you can hear it. It's pretty loud. And another big difference, which could be a deal breaker, is actually what kind of frame rates work best with each of these. The ATEM works with anything, but it really seems to prefer 30 FPS. So when you're doing your recording or your stream, if you keep your camera at 30 FPS, it's going to look its smoothest. If you put it at like 24 or 60 or something, sometimes you get a little bit of stuttering and weirdness. The cam link, in addition to being 4K, seems to really just accept whatever frame rate you throw at it. I think technically it's rated for 60 frames per second, but if you throw in 24 frames, 30 frames, 60, whatever, it handles it just fine and it looks really smooth. So there's a lot of advantages to the more affordable and simpler cam link that's also higher resolution and more compatible with other frame rates. However, if you need multiple sources and simple hardware switching, no matter how great this is, it just doesn't give you those features. And for me and my workflow, being able to do this has been kind of magical because I don't want to have multiple cam links connected. Now you probably will find other capture cards that look a lot like the cam link and they're a lot cheaper, but you get what you pay for. If you save money, you will pay for it in frustration. So if you want something like this, just get the actual cam link that's going to work really, really well. There are also other HDMI switchers out there, and some of them seem to get decent reviews and some of them don't. However, if you want 4K, then the cam link is the way to go. And if you want multiple 4K sources, you'll just need more than one cam link, or you'll need to figure out a way to use the Cam Link Pro. If you don't need 4K and you want multiple sources and easy physical hardware switching, that's when the ATEM Mini comes into play. But you can't go wrong with either of these, and if you're someone who streams a lot or captures video a lot, having at least one cam link kind of floating around in your setup is really helpful, or keeping it in your bag or something. These can be total lifesavers. So while there are quite a few differences between these two, which one is better is really going to come down to your individual workflow. I can say, after having used both of them for a long time now, that I really like them both. They both offer some super cool functionality, and it just depends on what you need. Speaking of things that I really like, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. I appreciate you very much. And if you want to know more about either of these things, be sure to check out my Cam Link review and my ATEM Mini review, and I'll see you over in one of those videos.